Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. If you've been checking this out the last few Tuesdays, you know that I've been doing my breakdown of the players' top 100 list, critiquing their picks, and then offering up my alternative list and explaining my decisions. We're really reaching the end of the list, so it's all the big name players at this point, and the players list, frankly, there's a reason they're the big name players. My list are pretty much all superstars at this point. A few new names though, so I think it's pretty exciting to find out where those guys land each year. So we'll hop right on in and see who the players have listed as the 20th best player in the NFL last season. They've gone with Carolina Panthers linebacker Luke Kuechly. Bit iffy on this one. Personally, I had him at 74. I thought he had one of his weakest seasons as a pro. Bear in mind, he has been utterly exceptional since he was drafted. But I think, as a whole, the Panthers didn't perform exceptionally last season defensively after a stellar season the year before. Especially the start of the season, I think Kuechly struggled more than I'm used to seeing him. He also, of course, missed about 5 or 6 games at the end of the season because of a concussion. Bit of a concern for the long term, but considering I don't think he played at enormously the level we've become accustomed to from him, and missing all those games, I do think that this is far too high. I still think he's the best pure coverage linebacker in the league, one of the smartest players at the position, has great range, fantastic tackler, really can do it all. But I think last year, Bobby Wagner of the Seahawks had a better season, missed a lot of games. I think this is far too high. He's there on name recognition, and can't agree with the players for having him this high up this year. Myself, number 20, I've got Marcus Peters, the Chiefs corner. Since I started doing these, I maybe think I should have switched him and Aqib Talib around. Looking back on last season, I think Talib probably was the best corner in the league. But Peters wasn't far behind. Bear in mind, I had Talib at 23, so if you want to switch those around for what's my current opinion, then feel free to do that. Reason being, I think Peters has still got some room for improvement. He certainly did improve last year, whilst his interception numbers were down. One of the reasons they were so high the year before was because he gambled so much. Teams were willing to take a chance with him because you could hit a big play. I think he reined it in a bit more last season, played guys tighter, wasn't trying to bait as much. Still incredibly productive, but I think he was a bit more consistent and reliable as a number one corner. Makes a lot of plays in the run game, possibly the best ball hawk in the league. I think he's absolutely exceptional in zone. I think he's probably the best zone corner in the league. He's got great eyes and a real ability to attack and take away the football, but he can also play man. He can run straight up with guys. Not the biggest corner in the world, but he plays very physically and really has no holes in his game. I'd expect him to continue to improve and compete for that kind of number one corner in football title every season from now on. He really has set the bar very high at this stage in his career. Coming in at 19 on the players list, another corner, Patrick Peterson, who I had at 32nd on my list, so maybe not an enormous difference. I thought Peterson once again had a very good season. Think some of the stuff I just said about Peters does apply here. I think he's a little aggressive at times, does try to bait teams. Teams didn't necessarily throw at him too much last year, so it was a bit of a tough evaluation. The rest of the Cardinals secondary struggled. He also has the toughest job in football, being a pure lockdown man-to-man corner on the team's number one guy. There aren't a lot of guys that do that in today's NFL. You've got Talib. I think Peters will be doing that week in, week out next season, and Peterson. And Peterson's the best equipped to do it because he's just an incredible athlete, physical, one of the fastest players in the league at any position. Just a great player. Not sure last season, maybe not the best corner in the league for me. As I say, I believe that was Talib. But we don't differentiate a huge amount here. I can understand why the players would put him here. He really is a unique player at that position. Myself, coming in at 19, I had the super dynamic Le'Veon Bell of the Steelers. Could easily have been higher, but of course he missed some games with the suspension at the start of the year, so it makes it difficult. especially because there were some exceptional running backs last season. But for me, the top running back in football is a weapon right now. An exceptional receiver, not just out of the backfield. You could line him up in the slot. You could probably put him out wide. Just incredible quickness. Helps him with route running. He's got very good hands. Running the ball. Can do it all. Can go up the middle. Bear in mind when he was drafted as like a 240 pound power back. He's cut that weight. Is a lot quicker and more dynamic as a result, but can still pound the ball. And you can tell he used to be a power style back because he will lower the shoulder and get those extra yards when there's no reason to be dancing or looking for extra yards. And he's happy to do it, and he's effective doing it, which is quite unique. That's when you watch him run. He's often looking for the cuts and lanes or to break it, but he is very intelligent in that regard, possibly as good as it gets in that regard. As I said, only reason he's not number one in my running back rankings, in my top 100 list, missed some games, but when he was in, especially towards the end of the year, when the passing game was struggling, as I mentioned before, I don't think Roethlisberger was quite right for the second half of the season. November, December didn't look like Roethlisberger, but Le'Veon Bell was just carrying this team. I mean, go look at that playoff game against Miami, where they just did not have an answer for him. He pretty much won the game by himself with a bit of help from Antonio Brown early in that one. It was absolutely dominant. That running style, whilst it's somewhat overly mentioned on by commentators, it is something to behold. I'm not sure other players should try it, because I think you've got to have a great O-line to be able to do that, and the Steelers most certainly do. So, coming in at 18 on the players list. That was a bit of an abrupt way of ending. My apologies there. We've got Tyron Smith, the Cowboys left tackle. For me, it wasn't his best season as a pass blocker. I think he was exceptional run blocking. Stepped up that aspect of his game. Someone on that Cowboys line I figured was going to be very high up on the list. I guess Tyron Smith's got it because he's been there the longest and he plays the most difficult position. I had him significantly low. I had him at 79 on my list. I thought he was good last year. I do think there were left tackles that had better seasons. I'll critique the players for having the wrong tackle up this high based on last season's play, but I will give them some plaudits for at least having one in this kind of range, because as I've moaned many times over the course of this series, the front five do not get even close to enough love, in my humble opinion. But yeah, he's going to be on the list pretty much every year for a long time, it looks like, because he's still incredibly young, especially considering how long it feels like he's been in the league at this point. But heck of a player. Coming in on my list at the 18 spot, Cam Jordan, the Saints defensive end. I think this is one of the most dominant players in the NFL on the defensive side of the ball. Bit unlucky in that we are in a glorious era for 3-4 defensive ends. I mean, there are a lot of good ones right now, and Jordan is stuck on a defense that's pretty much devoid of talent. I mean, when Sheldon Rankins came back into the lineup, he had someone to help him with the pass rush. Before that, there was nothing. It was just Cameron Jordan, and as a result, teams could focus on him. Still incredibly productive, gets a lot of pressure, would get more sacks, I think, if he had a bit more help. And he doesn't give up anything against the run whilst being so productive. There's still a stellar run player, exceptional at shedding blocks, really managed to make a lot of plays in the backfield. I wouldn't single block him if I was playing the Saints. I'd just double him all game long. Some teams do take that approach, and I think it's the right one. It'd be really good to see him with a more talented group around him, see what he can do there. But alas, that's not the case. I know this Saints defense is bad, but this guy, he does about as much as any one player can do to try and resolve that situation. Fantastic season, heck of a player. Coming in at 17 on the players list, I'm a bit torn on this one. This is a player I had at 71. AJ Green, the Bengals wide receiver. Now, I think this ranking is about right. Possibly should have been higher up based on how he was playing. He missed, obviously, the last chunk of the season, but he was going absolutely nanas early on in year, led the league in receiving yards, was having the best season of what's been a stellar career so far. I think the lack of weapons on that offense forced the Bengals to throw to him more, and he came up with the goods, making ridiculously high level catches, like difficult catches, dominating games, and really being the focal point of the Bengals offense. For that reason, I'm not going to critique the players too much. As I say, I think had he finished the season healthy, he would have probably had all of the, he'd have had the league leading yards. You'd have to think the way the season was going, possibly compete for touch. Could have led the league in just about every category. Was absolutely fantastic. For my money, the best route runner in football. Very rarely drops the ball. Has the deep speed. I mean, this is just a true elite player and has been pretty much since day one. Exceptional stuff. As I say, based on how he did play, I can see it. I just had him lower because of the injury. Coming in 17th on the list for myself, I had Eric Berry of the Kansas City Chiefs. Had an exceptional season. His story really is incredible, coming back from Hodgkin's lymphoma, but that's not got anything to do with his ranking. This is based purely on his play on the field. Pretty much won that game against the Falcons single-handedly. That was ridiculous, what he did in that game, but was making plays all year. I think he improved in terms of his turnover production. They moved him around a lot, had him playing, deep, had him playing in the box at times. I think that's a really good way to use him because he's exceptional in both regards. So being able to, have him just milling about defensively, the other team not sure necessarily what he's going to do, probably does allow him to make more plays. And boy, did he make plays. Great tackler, ball hawk, very dangerous when he's got the ball in his hands. Fantastic player. What a season. He comes in 17th on my list, second highest player at the safety position. Coming in 16th on the players list, and there was a point on the NFL site that I thought maybe I need to bear in mind. I had Breeze at 58th, the Saints QB coming in at 16 here. Do we take him for granted? There's certainly an argument that we do. Obviously, statistically, he's as productive, the most productive QB the league's ever seen on a season-by-season basis. Putting up 5,000 yard seasons consistently is just frankly absurd. Held back the last few years by, frankly, one of the worst, if you're totally in the year scale, one of the worst groups defensively the league's seen. Still manages to win them a bunch of games. He's got to score 30 points a game. Manages to do it with a degree of frequency. A lot of turnovers last year. Again, that's to me a function of having to try and score so many points. You've got to be aggressive. But considering the cast they've had the last few years, they've got good receivers. It's just hard to tell, would they be so good without Drew Brees? It's an interesting one. I can see why he'd come this high this year. I thought he'd be lower on the players list. Where I had him, partly a function of the turnovers. Maybe I should have had him higher. Starting to rethink that one a little, but it does start to feel like the status quo. Drew Brees last year, it just felt like another Drew Brees season. The only exception being I do think he's lost a bit on his deep ball, but still an exceptionally accurate passer. Fantastic mobility in the pocket, incredibly smart player. Maybe the players are right on this one, although I think probably somewhere in the middle ground may have been right. Myself, player number 16, for me, the top left tackle in football last season was Trent Williams of the Redskins. Man, this guy's good. He's, for some reason, considering he was a top 10 pick and it's a big market, Washington, he seems to fly somewhat under the radar, or is that just me? I don't know. I mean, there's no holes in his game. I thought he was dominant. Absolutely dominant in pass protection last year. Bear in mind, Cousins will hold on to that ball. That is a team that does throw it deep, or did throw it deep quite a lot last season. He does a great job one-on-one. One of the strongest players, in my opinion, at the tackle spot in the league right now. He's always been a great run blocker, but his pass protection seems to just get better and better by the year. His footwork's improved no end. His technique's improved. Last year he just had a pretty faultless season at the position, and for me, very much deserving of a spot this high up on the list. Coming in 15th on the players list. Oh, what a monster. The young, incomparable Aaron Donald of the Rams. I had him as the top interior lineman in all of football a few weeks ago during one of my weekly reviews when I was counting down that. I stand by that. Unless JJ Watt comes back fully healthy, then I'll let the two compete for my opinion on that one next season. But the Rams last year defensively started the year really well, fell off a bit after. Don't blame Donald for that. He is just utterly dominant. It's hard to really describe any holes in his game because I don't think there are any. He's a ferocious pass rusher, great first step, great power. Reminds me of Sapp in terms of the way he's built. He's quite stout, short, round, able to get under guys and just bull rush them. But he's also got that quickness and that hand speed to just shoot gaps, make plays instantly in the backfield, and he will wallop guys. I mean, if you had to design a defensive tackle for the modern NFL, I think this is what it'd be like. Next year he'll be playing 3-4 end, and I'm sure he'll be enormously productive there. It'll also make those comparisons to JJ Watt a lot easier. So that should be good. I think this is the most disruptive defender in football right now. Absolutely stunning player to watch. I mean, he's a game wrecker, and there's not a lot of those. It's constant. Still yet to be revealed on my list. Right, coming in at 15 on my list, I've got Steelers wide receiver Antonio Brown. Numbers were down a little bit last year, but I do think this goes down back to what I've said a few times before. Sorry, I don't want to sound like a broke record or anything, but the Steelers passing game really slowed down at the end of last season. Still incredibly dangerous weapon of the smaller, quicker receivers. I think he's the best in the league right now. Just a hair ahead of Odell Beckham for me. Just an incredible threat, especially with Martavis Bryant missing. Teams I think could focus more on Antonio Brown last year. Still incredibly productive. Great home run threat. Absolutely superb after the catch. Has great hands. Great route runner. Can really do it all for a guy of his size. Yeah, heck of a player. And well deserving of a spot incredibly high on this list. Is the run he's been on for the last few seasons is absolutely incredible, and for me probably puts him down as one of the all-time greats at the position, which is obviously high praise. Coming in 14th on the players list, one of the Cowboys rookies, Dak Prescott. Now, he had a great season. This ranking is pretty absurd to me. I had him at 98th on my list. He kind of squeaked in. Don't be wrong, he was great for a rookie. You've got to have context for this. Say Dak Prescott had a better season than Drew Brees or Matthew Stafford. No, he didn't. He had a really, really good team around him. His job was a lot easier. Again, not to take away from him. He did incredibly well. But he had the best O-line in football, the best run game in football, a decent group of wide receivers around him, and he didn't have to do as much as some of the other guys, and for that reason this ranking is far too high. A lot of easier completions, a lot of stuff off play action, off rollouts, because teams have to respect that run game. As I say, an exceptional run game, so he didn't have to throw the ball a huge amount. This was a team that was playing with big leads a lot of the time as well, and just running the clock out for fun. He didn't have to beat teams. The fact he didn't turn the ball over was one of the greatest assets of his season. He was incredibly efficient, but I don't think he had a particularly difficult, or wasn't asked to do anything enormously difficult. It's not to say he couldn't have. We don't know at this point. I'm intrigued to see how he follows it up in year 2, but this is an absolutely egregious place to put him at this point based on last season. The players have bought into the hype clearly. I can't agree with this one. Myself, I've got his fellow rookie in the backfield at this spot, Ezekiel Elliott, who was as exceptional as the hype would have you believe. Whilst, again, he has a slightly easier job because he's got the O-line, he is still the one who has to do the running. Led the league, of course, is decent catching the ball. I think he'll continue to improve in that regard. The timing, I think, has to be a lot tighter in the NFL. These linebackers are a lot better in coverage. They'll sniff things out. You have to be on point, and I think he'll continue to improve in that regard. And he was strong there. Much better in pass protection than your standard rookie. Great runner up the middle. He's got the speed. I think he ran incredibly intelligently for a rookie. Had it easy at times because that line opened some ridiculous holes. But he did a bit of a slow start, but once he got going, it looked like he'd been playing in the league for years. It looks like one of the best young players in the league. And it looks like he's just going to keep it going into the future. What a season he had. And has he been revealed yet on the players list? I don't think he has. So it looks like he's coming in the top 10, but it's not too far from myself. Coming in at number 13 for the players, a player I mentioned just earlier on in this episode, Eric Berry. It's hard to really say much more on him. I pretty much feel like I covered it there. We're pretty much in agreement. I don't think there's a huge gap between 17 and 13. One of the few me and the players in close sync on. So good job there, players. I think that's about right based on last season. Myself at 13, I had my top safety in the list, and that's Landon Collins of the Giants. Just his second year, and man, did he improve. His rookie season really did struggle in coverage. You see the tackling and hitting ability. Carried that over this year, but played very well in coverage. Was around the ball all season long. It was a risk thrown to his side. He played very well in coverage. If he wasn't, getting his hands on the ball, he was punishing guys within that vicinity. Obviously, the highlight play being that ridiculous pick six against the Rams. That was a heck of a play, and I think it helped build his profile because it was that kind of a play. But he really did play incredibly well for the remainder of the season. For me, was a legitimate defensive MVP. Plays in every phase of the game, made up for the poor linebacker core at times. Was just an absolute asset. Run, pass, did a great job. Clearly the game slowed down for him a lot, and his study habits absolutely paid off. So there's no way you're in the right place that much by guessing. That's just not how it works. So moving on up to player number 12 on the players list, David Johnson, the running back for the Cardinals. Wow, what a season he had. When you go over 100 yards from the line of scrimmage, was it 15 of 16 games? You're having a good year, especially on a team that regressed in just about every facet other than the run game last season. The offensive line wasn't great. The passing game was very inconsistent, particularly early in the season. The defense wasn't as good. But David Johnson, he won some of those games pretty much by himself. Was probably you could argue he was the best receiver the Cardinals had last year, and was as dangerous a runner as any. I mean, he was running through guys, he was running round guys, he was making plays in the passing game. He really did do it all. Him and Le'Veon Bell, very similar kind of players at this point in their careers for me. And Johnson just played in more games, so he got my vote to come in ahead of him. This is the top running back on my list, I believe, and I stand by that. I think last year, especially when you have to bear in mind that the other two runners in Zeke and Le'Veon Bell had far better situations running behind some of the better lines. The Cardinals line was a mess last year due to injuries. The passing game was not particularly productive, but teams just didn't have an answer for David Johnson. If he can continue at that kind of pace, man, his numbers are going to be silly again next year. So you'll see him on my list shortly. So again, I can't critique the players for this one. I think this is a very fair kind of position for him. Myself at 12, I have The highest rated Buccaneer on my list, Mike Evans, the wide receiver. I thought he was exceptional last year, and a lot of what I just said about David Johnson kind of applies here. The Buccaneers offense was not particularly good last year. I think if you were playing against the Buccaneers, your thought process was, let's stop Mike Evans and we'll probably be okay. And the team certainly did take that approach. It just didn't always work for them. Look to the Seahawks game, scores 2 touchdowns early in that game, both on Sherman, makes a couple of plays where he's doubled that are just ridiculous. Made probably the best highlight reel of any receiver in football last year, because he was making incredibly high difficulty catches on a regular basis, partly because of the of the Cardinals. I think I really said it all there. One of the absolute top weapons in all of football. Plays with power, incredibly fast, elusive, great hands, does it all, and was as dynamic as any running back in football last year, especially considering the lack of help around him. I expect to see that continue next year. I would like to see him get less touches, just because I worry about the longevity of a player who has to see as much of the ball as he did last year. But there's no denying the impact he had. Without him, I dread to think what the Cardinals would have looked like. So there you have it. That's the list this week. Next week, of course, we'll be finishing up. The week after that, I'm looking to do a special episode where I cover a statistical breakdown that I'm going to do of my list as opposed to the players. We'll talk about some of the differences in what positions, numbers-wise on the list. Some of what I think are the glaring omissions from the players list. Maybe reconsider a couple of my own decisions, as I've already got some ideas as to ones that I may have changed my mind on a little bit. I think that'll be a good episode. Check out some more of the stuff coming up this week. I've got the power rankings that I've come up with. What I've done is I've broke down each position group and graded them all across the league to try and come up with a more objective form of power ranking. I think that's going to be a really interesting pair of episodes, as well as the finale next Monday again, where I go through. I've got offense and defense coming up, so check them out. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you could like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, all that good stuff, it'd be greatly appreciated. It's always fun to talk football, so we've got the comment section below. Find us on Twitter at Simon Conboy. Find us on Facebook at Cover Zero. Give me your own lists. Critique my list. Critique the players list. Doesn't matter. We'll talk football. It'll be great. I always do my best to get back to each and every one of you. And as always, thank you so much for watching. It is greatly appreciated. It's been a pleasure as always. And have a great evening. Go Bucks.